The girl had not eaten in 2 days. Her lips were cracked, her eyes red from dust and fear, her wrists tied with rough hemp rope that burned her skin every time she moved. The sun over Dodge City was cruel that summer, turning everything into a furnace. Even the air seemed to hiss with judgment. She sat on the back of a wooden wagon in front of the stockyard, clothes torn, barefoot, trembling, and surrounded by men who laughed. They said she was lucky to be alive. But Lila Byrne did not feel lucky. She felt like an animal waiting for the next command. When she whispered, her voice was a ghost. Please do it quick. No one listened. The crowd was busy haggling over her like she was a mule. Silas Crow, the man who had dragged her from Santa Fe Trail, waved a paper in the air. He said she cost more to feed than she was worth. He said someone should take her before the marshal found out he was selling people instead of cattle. Then a stranger stepped out of the crowd. His hat shadowed his eyes, his shirt soaked with sweat from the long ride. Illy McKenna, rancher 56, known for his temper and for walking alone since his wife died. He watched the girl without a word, his hands resting on the belt that once held a wedding ring. How much? He asked. Silas smirked. She's used a mouth that talks too much. Give me $1 and she's yours. A laugh rolled through the yard. A human life for $1. Illy reached into his pocket, pulled out a single worn coin, and dropped it on the barrel between them. The clink of metal cut through the noise. Every man froze. He did not touch her, he did not untie her, he just said, "Get off that wagon." La hesitated. She thought he meant to end her misery right there. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe that was what freedom sounded like in a place where souls were cheaper than horses. She stood, legs shaking, waiting for the pain to come instead. Illy turned to Silas. "Now write your name on that paper," he said, "so everyone sees this trade was yours." Silas hesitated, but Illy's voice carried weight. In the law of the frontier, even $1 made a transaction binding. What Silas thought was a sale was now a record a man could hang for selling another soul in Dodge, and Illy knew it. When Leah realized what he had done, her knees gave out. He had not bought her, he had freed her. The yard fell silent. The wind carried the smell of cattle and iron. Leah looked at the stranger, unsure if she should thank him or fear him, and somewhere deep inside a question took shape. If a man could buy her freedom for $1, what would he ask for in return? The road out of Dodge was dry and endless. The sun burned red as blood, hanging low above the plains, warning the day was almost over. Leah sat on the sideboard, her hands still raw from the ropes, her mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. She was free, at least that was what the stranger said, but freedom was a strange word when you had nowhere to go. Illy rode ahead of her, quiet, like a man who had already buried too many words. He didn't ask where she came from. He didn't ask what Silas had done. He just said, "We'll ride till the river. You'll eat there." By the time the sun dipped low, they reached the Arkansas River. The water shimmered like silver glass. Illy set up camp without talking much. He gave her a canteen and half a loaf of bread. It wasn't kindness in his eyes. It was something steadier, like duty. When she tried to thank him, he waved it off. "You don't owe me," he said. "I paid $1 to stop a bad thing, not to start another." That night, the coyotes cried far off across the plains. The stars looked close enough to touch, and Leah felt small beneath them. She watched Illy sitting by the fire, whittling a piece of cedar into a horse's head. His hands were rough but careful. He reminded her of the father she wished she had met in another life. She finally asked, "Why'd you help me? You didn't even know my name." He didn't look up, didn't need to. "I knew the man selling you, and I knew he was the kind who'd trade his own shadow for whiskey." That answer made her chest tighten. For the first time, she believed maybe there were still men who could see something worth saving. When morning came, she found a clean shirt folded near her blanket. It was too big, but it smelled like smoke and soap. She laughed for the first time in months. Illy looked over, startled, then almost smiled. Almost they rode again through tall prairie grass, the wind cool against her face. She wasn't sure where they were headed. Maybe to his ranch near Cimarron, maybe nowhere, but the road no longer looked like a prison. At a small creek she washed her hands. The water ran red with old dirt. Illy said softly, "Don't look back too much. Out here, it's the shest way to lose your way." She nodded, not trusting her voice. As dusk came, the world felt wide again. Hope was still fragile, but it was real now, resting somewhere between her ribs and her breath. She thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. But she was wrong, because someone in Dodge had already noticed that Illy McKenna had taken something money was never meant to buy, and that someone was coming. 2 days later, the dust of Dodge City found them again. It always does. Trouble in that town never stays buried long. Leah and Illy had stopped near Cimarron Creek. He was fixing the wagon wheel. She was boiling coffee in an old tin pot. For a moment it almost looked like peace. Then the sound of hooves broke it. 3 riders, one with a shiny badge that didn't mean justice anymore. Deputy Ward, the man who worked for the same law that looked away when Silas sold people. Illy stood slow but steady. "Afternoon, Ward," he said. The deputy grinned, mean and lazy. "Afternoon, McKenna. Heard you bought yourself a girl. Got folks in Dodge talking." Ward's grin widened, his eyes gleaming with greed, knowing Silas had promised him a cut of the money if they caught the girl first. Leah froze. She knew that tone. It was the same tone men used before they decided what a woman was worth. Illy didn't move. "You heard wrong," he said. Ward laughed. "Come on now. You paid for her, dollar or not, that makes her yours." "Law says property needs to be registered." The other 2 riders chuckled. Illy's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Law also says if you forge a sale, you swing for it." Ward's smile faded. He wasn't used to being challenged. He spat in the dirt. "You keep talking big, old man. You'll lose more than cattle. Maybe that ranch of yours, too." Leah stepped forward before Illy could stop her. "She's not property," she said, her voice shaken but strong. "He bought my freedom, not me." Ward turned his horse toward her. "You think folks going to believe that?" The question hung in the air like gun smoke. Illy's hand went to his belt, slow, measured. The men saw it and backed their horses just a little, enough to know he wasn't bluffing. Ward pointed at Leah. "You 2 stay out of Dodge. Next time I see you, I'll make sure that paper of yours don't mean a damn thing." He pulled the reins, turned his horse, and rode off laughing. The sound of hooves faded. Only the wind remained. Leah sat down hard, the tin cup shaking in her hands. She whispered, "They'll come back." Illy stared at the horizon, the sun sinking red. "Yeah," he said, "they will." The coffee boiled over, hissing in the fire, and the smell bitter and sharp. That night neither of them slept much. The stars seemed smaller, and every coyote call felt closer than it should. By dawn, the trail ahead didn't feel safe anymore. Something had changed. The law wasn't behind them now. It was coming for them, and that's where the real storm of this story begins. So, before we ride into it, take a breath, pour yourself a cup of tea, and tell me what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? If you're still here, it means you love a good story as much as I do. Go on, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when the West finally turns against its own. By the 3rd night, the wind had changed. It carried the smell of rain and gunpowder. Illy knew that meant trouble was close. He didn't say a word, just loaded the rifle, tied down the wagon cover, and told Illa to keep the lantern low. They were riding through Raton Pass, a cut of red rock and shadow between Kansas and New Mexico. The path twisted like a snake. Below them, the valley was black and wide. No moon, no sound but the steady creak of the wagon wheels. Leah sat beside him, holding the reins tight. She could feel it, too, the way the air thickened when danger got near. It started with a flicker of light on the ridge, then another. 3 riders again. Illy didn't need to guess who. He whispered. Silas, the man who once sold her for $1, had come to take her back. Not for money this time, for revenge. Ward had told him where to find them. The riders came fast, kicking up dust that glowed like ghosts in the starlight. Illy shouted, "Hold on!" Silas roared from the ridge, his eyes red with rage and shame. Still burning from the laughter of the Dodge crowd that day, he cracked the reins. The wagon jolted forward, wheels bouncing over rock. Bullets tore through the air. One splintered the backboard, another grazed Illy's arm. He didn't flinch. Law grabbed the rifle from the seat. Her hands shook, but her aim was steady. She fired once, missed, fired again. The sound echoed through the canyon like thunder. Silas cursed and pulled back, regrouping with his men behind a boulder. Billy used that moment to steer the wagon toward the riverbed below. The horses stumbled, dirt flying. They made it down just before the gunfire started again. When they reached the dry creek, Illy jumped off, yelling, "Go hide in the rocks." Leia hesitated. "I'm not leaving you. Do as I say." She ran to the shadows while Illy crouched behind the wagon, reloading. Silas's men fanned out across the ridge. Their laughter echoed through the night. Then silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. A match struck. Light flared near the wagon. Silas had set the brush on fire. Flames spread fast, licking the dry grass. Illy moved before he thought, pulling a blanket, beating down the sparks. But the smoke rose thick, giving away his spot. Leia saw him through the haze. She lifted the rifle again, whispering, "Please do it quick." This time, not from fear, but from resolve, her shot cracked the air. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was the one thing her father ever taught her before he sold their last horse. How to steady a rifle when fear tried to steal your aim. The fire died down with the sound of a man falling. The others turned and fled into the dark, leaving only the echo of hooves fading up the ridge. Leia dropped the rifle and ran to Illy. He was bleeding but still breathing. She pressed her hands to the wound, trembling. "You're not leaving me, not now." Illy's eyes opened just enough to see her face in the firelight. He smiled faintly. "You've got fire in you, girl." But behind them, from somewhere in the canyon, came another sound. More riders, more trouble, and this time they wore badges. The morning came slow and heavy. Smoke still hung in the air, and the river below the ridge glowed faintly and with ash. Illy was alive, though pale. The blood dried dark on his sleeve. Leia sat beside him, her hands shaking, but her heart steady. They had survived, for now the riders with badges never reached them that night. Maybe they turned back. Word had spread that Silas was dead, and Deputy Ward, knowing his own name, was tied to that deal, chose to disappear before the marshals started asking questions. Maybe they finally saw that not every man who breaks the rules is a criminal, and not every woman who runs is lost. By noon, they reached Fort Union, where the marshal heard the story and saw the paper with Silas's name. The marshal had crossed paths with Silas years before, back when half the cattle rustlers in New Mexico worked under his name. So the signature was all he needed to believe the story, $1, a single coin that proved who the real criminals were. That was all it took to turn a sale into a rescue. When the marshal released them, Illy stood tall again, older but stronger. He looked at Leia and said, "You're free now, truly free." On the road leaving Fort Union, the wind carried the smell of grass and rain. Leia turned to him and asked softly, "Where will you go now?" Illy looked out over the wide prairie and said, "Wherever the world still needs people like us." He handed her the paper that bore her name. She stared at it, tears filling her eyes. No one had ever written her name on anything that mattered before. That night, they camped near Cimarron, where the grass rolled like waves and the air smelled of rain. Leia sat by the fire, holding that paper close to her chest. Freedom, she realized, wasn't something you were given. It was something you had to claim. One breath, one step, one fight at a time. Illy smiled across the fire. He said quietly, "The world will keep trying to sell you cheap. Don't ever let it decide your price." Leia nodded. She knew now that every scar, every mile, every tear had led her here to a place where she could finally choose her own story. When the sun rose, she saddled her horse herself. The prairie stretched endless and golden before her. Somewhere beyond it waited new towns, new names, and new lives to build. She turned to Illy and said, "You coming with me?" He grinned, "If you'll have me." And just like that, two souls who had once been broken rode into the open, side by side, chasing something bigger than forgiveness. They were chasing peace. Maybe that is what the West was always about. Not gold, not land, but the courage to start over, no matter what was taken from you. Tell me, if you were there that day, would you have paid that dollar to set her free, or would you have walked away? If this story touched something in you, give it a like so more folks can find it too. And if you believe in second chances, in people finding their worth again, go on and hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. Now pour yourself another cup of tea, lean back and tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Because out here in the West, every story starts the same way. Music.